And welcome to another episode of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny. We're joined this episode by business journalist Jason Del Rey, who spent a decade at the leading technology online publication Recode, where he was a senior commerce correspondent. He was also host of Land of the Giants, a narrative podcast focusing on the rise and impact of Amazon, and he's producer of Code Commerce, an event series featuring interviews with influential executives and entrepreneurs who work at the intersection of technology and commerce. He's a graduate of Georgetown and the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism and author of Winner Sells All, Amazon, Walmart, and the Battle for Our Wallets. He was named in 2019 by the National Retail Federation as one of 25 people shaping retail's future. So we'll have an opportunity to speak with him about that and many other things. If you have questions for him or comments, please feel free to send them to us. And remember that you can be a member of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny simply by going to graymatter.show, and that's Gray with an E. And welcome, Jason Del Rey.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Glad to have you. And I thought maybe we talk about these two global giants initially. Boy, I remember seeing a review of the book. It said a story of ego and revenge and the changing way we shop, live, and work. I mean, that's really the kind of hype that will get you interested and got a lot of people interested. I know the book did well. These two Goliaths, as they're called, defining business for our generation, perhaps, in the clash, as many put it. But Amazon's winning the war, aren't they? They're probably pretty much already won the war.
I would say that's an unknown answer right now. They are many miles ahead in e-commerce, but in the last few years, they have really tried to expand into physical retail, where some 80% of transactions still happen, while Walmart comes in the other direction to digital. And I'd say as of right now, Walmart's finally doing a better job in their digital world than Amazon is in physical. And so I think Amazon's really at an inflection point right now. Goliath in many ways, ahead of Walmart in many ways online, but physical retail has been a real struggle for them. And I think they feel like they need to succeed there to reach their ultimate goals.
Why was Walmart so slow? Maybe that's too harsh a characterization, but in getting on board just online, I mean, it's kind of remains a little bit of a mystery. They thought that being online was a cute side project. Wasn't that the phrasing?
I mean, that's how it came across. That's how they treated it. I have a great anecdote in my book. I found this former Walmart employee named Robert Davis. He believed in e-commerce back in the mid-90s, was experimenting inside Walmart, thought Walmart could be what Amazon has become online. And the CEO at the time, David Glass, when Robert was asking for a little more commitment to e-commerce back in 1998, CEO said, this thing will never be bigger than a single Sam's Club store annual sales. And, it's kind of easy to understand that thinking back then. Walmart was the titan, and this thing was new. And so Robert and a bunch of other Walmart employees back then, they end up going to Amazon, being key to their success there. So I think they were also, as years went on, they were just scared of what it would do to their profitability at Walmart. Their in-store sales are everything, much more profitable than online sales back in the early days. And so it was this classic innovator's dilemma, I believe.
Well, they had the super centers. They were paying a lot of attention to that, certainly, maybe to the detriment of getting into the online world. But you were talking about fear that Walmart had. They also had fear of what could have been a lot of bucks for them in terms of health care. Can you tell that story? Because I think they were afraid they were going to get nailed like they did with opioids and things of that sort by the DOJ.
Yeah, so years later, I have a whole chapter in the book about each company's ambition in healthcare, something I didn't know a ton about before I started reporting the book, but I got up to speed with the help of some great sources. And in recent years, they battled Amazon for an acquisition of a young online pharmacy called PillPack. Walmart was going to make this big splashy deal, and then at the last minute, they put a pause on the talks. Still unclear what happened, but it was around the same time the DOJ was, in fact, starting to investigate Walmart in relations to their pharmacies' sales of opioids. And so Amazon ends up sort of stealing this acquisition, one of many that went Amazon's way instead of Walmart's way. And Walmart's current CEO, Doug McMillon, on the day the Amazon deal for this startup called PillPack was announced, he actually called the founder of PillPack trying to get him to back out of a deal. This was the kind of back and forth between the companies that I tried, behind the scenes, that I tried to tell readers about, the influence they had on each other's strategies that has largely gone unknown, I believe, until my deep dive in this book.
Well, it is a deep dive. Congratulations on the book. It's very revelatory and it's very illuminating. And I see that you got a plug, in fact, on the book from Brad Stone, who I've done a number of interviews with, who is head of tech writing at Bloomberg. He calls it a bloody, ruthless rivalry. And that's not necessarily hyperbolic. I mean, they were trying to really pound each other into the ground and all other competition.
That they are, and at different points in their histories, as I chronicle in the book, maybe one cared about the other or was worried about the other more than the other. I think at this point in history, they're actually both pretty aware of the threat to each other's business. But it took inside Walmart a couple of entrepreneurs coming in, a guy named Mark Laurie, who once sold diapers.com to Amazon, then sold jet.com to Walmart. Took him and a couple of leaders to really increase the urgency on the digital side inside Walmart. And to the point that Walmart's CEO, to the board, as I report, he actually called Amazon an existential threat to their business. This was about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And,
this is Doug McMillon you're talking about?
Doug McMillon, yeah, the current CEO of Walmart, been there a decade. And so and they, on the labor side, they also impact how their warehouses run, trying to copy from each other in different ways over the years. So it really is just fierce across the board.
I got a question from John in Reno, Nevada, and we'll take your questions now if you want to bring them to the fore here. John says, many tech markets end up with two dominant players, an open and a closed system. Amazon seems to be both with first-party and marketplace sales. Who, if anyone, will be second dominant player in online retail?
Well, right now it's Walmart. Finally,
Yeah.
They weren't for a long time. So I think they finally are sort of hitting their stride, finally using their stores as an advantage that Amazon long feared they would. So you can order online and get delivery or pickup from a nearby supercenter. And I think 90% of the country, everyone is 10 miles or less from a Walmart center. So, outside of maybe San Francisco and New York City, everyone's near a Walmart. So, it feels like it's going to be Walmart, at least in the U.S. market, and in some other key markets like India, where both are top dog there, with the help of some acquisitions as well.
I'm reading, though, about Walmart getting hurt by not only theft in the stores that's rampant and ubiquitous, especially in certain places, San Francisco being a prime example, but also maybe organized crime being behind a lot of those thefts. They're getting hurt with their bricks and mortar.
So a lot of the traditional brick and mortar retailers are talking about this issue. Target's another one that has really harped on it in their earnings calls. And it is a real problem, but at times I do wonder whether some of the retailers are using this a little bit as an excuse for some disappointments in other ways in their business, not keeping in stock the inventory that they need to, or being unable to liquidate inventory as quickly as they need to. So it is a real threat. I think Walmart has seemingly, they're trying to deal with it, but Amazon, they sometimes benefit from this. That great deal on Amazon that's $40 below an in-store price, it may be because Amazon squeezed the vendor, but it also may be because you're buying stolen goods. They're spending a lot of money trying to figure it out, but they've been one beneficiary of this trend, whether they want to admit it or not.
What about the fact that when it comes to Wall Street, the profits of Walmart are sent, but with Amazon, we're talking about investments for the most part. It's a very different ballgame, different calculus.
Yeah. One of the most brilliant things Jeff Bezos ever did. And at the time, his CFO, who's since passed away, Joey Covey, what they did when they went public, they from day one said to Wall Street, like, we are thinking long term. We will worry about free cash flow, but profits you should not expect for a long time because there's so much growth to be had. And they stuck with that messaging and has largely worked for them. Whereas Walmart, by the time Amazon went public, Walmart had been public for years, and Wall Street expected profits, profits, profits. And so, I chronicle in my book, you have some real innovator's dilemma, sort of tension and infighting between e-commerce and physical retail teams inside of Walmart the last few years. And a big part of that is profits versus growth mentality. And so that has sort of created for Amazon in the early years with Wall Street what some analysts have called the hall. They almost had a hall pass. They got this long leash to lose money for a long time, and eventually turned it on in recent years with advertising business and the very profitable Amazon Web Services business as well.
Again, our guest is Jason Del Rey, and we have Benjamin from Birmingham wanting to know, caught between Amazon and Walmart, how do smaller retailers, even mom and pop, stay relevant? What can they do to survive?
That's a
Thank
great
you for
question.
the question. It's a good question, yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind. If you're in a business where you are selling similar merchandise to these two behemoths, and let's be real, like Amazon sells just about everything under the sun. So a couple of things. I talk to small businesses in my town here in New Jersey. They try to increase their service experience. So you walk in their store and, they have maybe an extra person working. It's expensive, but they want you to feel that they will answer every question you have, and you will feel like you are welcome, like you're a member of their community. That's one. Another one is Amazon does a really poor job. Walmart, in some ways too, at curation. The online, it's the everything store, but it's messy. It's not easy to necessarily find what you want or what you might want. And so curation and merchandising are still really important. The last thing I'll just say, if you're in a merchandise business, having some exclusive selection, it still exists. Brands that won't sell to Amazon or Walmart, and trying to feature those, that's something that has worked for some small businesses as well. But it's an uphill battle in most retail categories for anyone not named one of the big behemoths.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me that the battery went dead in his alarm. So he looked at the alarm company and $60 for a new battery. And then he went to battery.com. It was $40. It was $20 from Amazon and would deliver to his door. I mean, that's very tough to compete with that sort of thing for any retailer.
It is tough. And that's why, you have some critics in certain antitrust circles who don't love that Amazon has sort of, in their opinion, been allowed to get to this point, whether it's through and what they see as anti-competitive behavior against their own sellers, or for many years not having to collect sales tax on their orders up until the early 2010s when that finally changed. But in some ways, felt like it was already too late.
On the other hand, you write about Walmart and the way it plunders local communities. That's not too harsh a verb in terms of tax breaks.
They do have that history. And, I reread Sam Walton's biography, Made in America, as I was reporting out my book. And he's, he does not love a small business closing, but he was pretty plain-faced about the idea that if we come into your town and we're serving customers with better prices than you, or just giving them what they want, well, maybe tough luck, but it's not that easy, of course, right? They do have a reputation of getting breaks from communities, but beyond that, just putting the squeeze on suppliers to such a large extent that we saw, they were a big reason why we've seen so much manufacturing go out of this country over the last few decades.
Indeed. And here's David from Seattle who says, Amazon has Amazon Vine, which gives selected individuals products at no cost, but requires written reviews with photos or videos. Does Walmart have a comparable program to get reviews of new items?
Oh, that's a great question. And I thought in the last couple of years, Amazon had put some real restrictions on the Vine program or turned it down a bit. I'm going to be candid. I don't know I have not seen what Walmart's similar program is. And if they have one, I'm not aware of it. If you want to find me online, I'm happy to look into that for you. And it did not come up in my book, though.
How much do they do really kind of hardcore PR? I mean, in ways that really enhance their business on a day-to-day basis. I'm talking about both Walmart and Amazon, because I know you, like Brad Stone, had a lot of difficulty getting any kind of access to Jeff Bezos. Although
Oh,
you
yeah.
did get to talk to him mainly about a clothing line. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Maybe you can
Yeah.
share that with us. But
I'm actually wearing, just for fun, I'm wearing the one Amazon branded shirt I have. Although I read one of my counterparts at the Wall Street Journal, I read her reporting yesterday. They're doing away with this brand I'm wearing called Good Threads. And so it'll soon be vintage. But yes, sorry. Sorry to interrupt me.
no, but you got to Bezos asking him
Yeah.
if he was wearing the clothes that they were presenting in their merchandise. And I mean, it was a quick conversation, but why that terror about anybody, reporter, journalist, even having face to face with him or talking to him, interviewing him?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've sat and watched some interviews with Jeff at conferences. It's been with some great interviews, but never with someone who's a beat reporter who knows the company really well. At least in the decade I've covered the company, I think part of it is they don't want to have the toughest conversations publicly. But I think a big part of it is this feeling at the top of the company that their critics are just misunderstood and wrong, and they don't want to engage with what they view as sort of bad faith arguments. And so, for a guy who owns the Washington Post and talks about how important journalism is to a free democracy, it's been a little disappointing for sure over the years, not only for myself, but there's a small group of us beat reporters who have covered the company for many years, and we talk about it, of course, because it's not what you want. We do our reporting in other ways, but you want this person who's one of the richest in the world, so much power in so many ways, to answer with the tough questions in their own words.
Well, I was reading you started out wanting to be, or you were a sports journalist before you got into this world of commerce.
I grew up dreaming of that, and I did about a year of sports reporting at a daily newspaper in New Jersey before going back to graduate school, and frankly, kind of falling. I grew up in a family of small business owners and entrepreneurs, so I love the business world, but I fell into business journalism because there were no good sports journalism jobs at the time. But that is now well about 17 years ago, and so I've 100% fallen in love with business journalism as well, even with as difficult as it is to cover a company like Amazon and Walmart too.
Well, what do you see as the future of retail, especially with AI on the rise? And I mean, we don't know where that's all going. We have glimmers of it and hopes as well as real fears. But where do you see it affecting retail, and especially the digitalized world we're in now, as you alluded to it?
Yeah, so some of the big retailers, I mean, I'll try not to give away too much sourcing, but they're looking to try to figure out the search experience on a product site. They think that will really be reinvented by AI. You might not be searching for a product now. You may just be asking a recommendation, and the technology is gonna spit back to you some really personalized recommendations. But they are also, some of these companies are also looking to hire some journalists or people with editorial background to make sure the AI kind of comes across as more human-like, which I don't know, frankly, how I feel about that. So I think in that regard, AI will, just in the online search experience, will play a big role. But we're also seeing it in other ways in the supply chain. Amazon has talked about using AI to help and machine learning to help them determine how to get the freshest produce. And, so there's I think we are at this sort of tipping point where I think the retail industry will be reinvented through technology. But I think Walmart and some other big players are investing heavily as well. And I don't think it's just an Amazon ballgame.
Speaking of produce, I came up with a fact that I thought was fascinating. I like to just weave these in because Walmart's best-selling item, bananas. They're the biggest banana vendor in the world. They sell about 1.5 billion pounds of bananas each year. Think of that old Louis Prima song, "Yes, we have no bananas." But, I mean, this is really a dominant factor about them. Here's Olivia from St. Louis, and thank you for this question, Olivia. In terms of supply chain management, which you were just talking about, Jason, how does Walmart's renowned inventory management system compare to Amazon's distribution network?
Oh, well, I mean, Walmart's is still absolutely renowned, but Amazon sort of created this a bit of a new part of the industry, which was these fulfillment centers. With Walmart's facilities previously, they were made to ship stuff by the pallet to stores, and so this idea of shipping one item at a time through a fulfillment center, it was really, in many ways, an Amazon invention. That said, over the years, Walmart has now borrowed a lot of ideas from Amazon, along with some executives' expertise, to try to mimic some parts of the Amazon delivery system, some parts of the middle mile of logistics. I lay a lot of this out in the book. There's a lot of tension here. And a lot of Walmart realizing that an Amazon playbook inside our company may sound great, but doesn't actually always work great, with a different culture and a different expectation about what the work will be like from warehouse workers. So there's a lot there. I think they both have their significant expertise, and they've tried to borrow from each other, but not always to great success.
Well, they've both been damned for meager wages and mistreatment of employees and labor problems and so forth. Give us a little sense of how you take the pulse on that.
Yeah, it's obviously a really important topic. They're the two largest employers in this country outside of the federal government. And so they directly impact millions of employees and how they do their work every day. Even beyond that, so many companies look to these two, especially Amazon in recent years, as models for efficiency and productivity. And so there's this Amazonification, as some people call it, of the workforce outside of Amazon. So the tentacles reach far and wide. So that's why it's important. It's a tough topic because in many ways their wages have increased to a point, yes, forced to do so by public pressure and government pressure, to where, in some markets they are, better payers than many others. On the other hand, this race for efficiency, productivity, and speed has led to automation, not that it's necessarily taking jobs away, but it's speeding up the work. And we see this case with Amazon in Washington State with the Department of Labor there, where these all these injuries that are not life-threatening, but they're injuries from repetitive motion, from having to pick 300, 400 items in an hour, that comes with robots working aside the humans. That is trickling over to Walmart as well. And so that's one space where I'm just watching, because the wages are increasing, but there are many unsafe jobs. But should Amazon and Walmart, with how powerful and successful they are, be the home to these types of injury rates? I mean, I think a lot of people would say no.
And a question from Reed in Santa Rosa, and thank you for the question, Reed. Do you think Amazon and Walmart, with their resources, will step up significantly to help the residents of Maui? It'd be good PR if they did. So.
I mean, if they do, you can be sure it's going to be all over their social media accounts, because absolutely good PR. I remember a key sort of inflection point for Walmart as it relates to how they treat natural disasters and how they think about helping. was Hurricane Katrina, and they had this executive meeting at the time. And I think the CEO said to his staff, I believe it might have been a CEO named Lee Scott at the time, and he said something like, "How about instead of just counting, how much we're sending, how about if we just send the bodies and the resources that we're told are needed?" And they got a ton of good press there, and they did good work. And I've seen Amazon do it, the Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and other ways at the beginning of the war with Russia and Ukraine. And so if they haven't done it yet, I'd be shocked if there's not some work being done to get that in motion. And as you said, these both companies, I think they look for the good PR they can get, because there is a lot of bad PR as well.
They wanted to get good PR with Theranos. In fact, I think they spent more than anybody, about $150 million with Theranos, didn't they?
I thought that was Walgreens and not Walmart that had done
Is that
some
Walgreens?
significant
Yeah,
investing.
I stand corrected if that's the case. I thought it was Walmart. I thought it was Sam Walton and company. Yeah.
I did not think so with Theranos, but I 100% sure Sam Walton wanted his company to be a big healthcare player, and less than a year before he passed away in 1992, when he found out how much the hospital was upcharging him for an MRI, and he found out the real cost behind it. I dug up this YouTube video of him back in this internal meeting, just talking about the healthcare system and how Walmart really needs to do something about it. It's several decades ago, but they're trying in many ways to reinvent it too.
Well, what do they do for PR, though? I mean, I'm thinking about the fact that Adam Werbach, who was a 23-year-old president of the Sierra Club, youngest in history, I remember doing an interview with him where he was talking about, we're not greenwashing anymore. We're doing real stuff about transportation so we don't build up the carbon. And they were, for quite a while, doing those sorts of things. I mean, innovating even, weren't they?
Is that what Walmart?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they are absolutely. And I think it started off in the mid 2000s with a belief that what we've been doing PR wise and business wise is not working to satisfy our critics, and they're only getting louder. And so the CEO Lee Scott went on a little bit of a listening tour. They started making big changes toward becoming a more environmentally friendly company. They're still critics, of course, but there has been a lot of good done by them for a large mammoth company. Some will never be happy with how much they've done, but solar on every on every roof of Supercenter and all sorts of other things that you alluded to. So I think, yes, recently in my neighborhood in New Jersey, I found we've been getting Amazon deliveries to our neighborhood recently by electric van. These are the Rivian vans. But I was in a parking lot across the town, and I also saw a Walmart Plus, which is their subscription service. It said Walmart Plus delivery van, and that was also electric. And so part PR for sure, but I think they're really trying to where they can spend money in a way that has people look at them differently, and not just as the ones sending up the global warming in this, around this world.
Well, we have from the source of authority, Alex, telling us that Walton family invested $150 million in Theranos, not Walmart. So,
okay. Well, we were both wrong. I thought Walgreens wasn't. You were closer. I thought Walgreens was involved as well, but he can tell us whether I'm right or not.
Yeah. Well, the battle is on then, huh? They're still going at it, still at each other's throats.
They are, and it'll get even more fierce around the world. I mean, it's fierce here in the U.S., but one market where it's incredibly fierce is also India, which both companies see as sort of the next great e-commerce market. They both sort of failed in their own ways in China. Walmart had some success there, and they look at the population of India, the mobile phone and data penetration there, and that forced Walmart's hand to make the biggest acquisition in its history back in 2018 when it bought 70+% stake in a company called Flipkart, which was Amazon's main rival there. In fact, started by two former Amazon employees, which always adds some intrigue to any business battle. And so, yes, they care about each other a lot. They think about each other a lot, no matter Amazon, what they say about customer obsession. And my only hope is that this battle continues to have more positive outcomes for everyday people than negative. So we'll see.
What would embellish that hope, or what would give that flight?
Continuing to see improvements in working conditions and how they treat their lowest paid employees. I talked to Doug McMillon, the CEO, about this when I met with him in Bentonville last year for the book. And he said they'll continue to raise wages, sometimes with the help of automation, taking away some of the most menial work. But he also said, in his opinion, there's too much focus on the entry level wage, and that you get rewarded at Walmart by moving up. You talk to a Walmart employee and they'll say, man, it's really hard to move up, and some managers are taken advantage of with how thinly they're spread. And so, some pressure on the labor front, I think, would be good for the millions of people who work there. And then we'll see what happens with the FTC potential antitrust suit against Amazon, and whether that leads to them having a more fair relationship with the hundreds of thousands of merchants who sell through their site.
Turns out, by the way, that Walgreens invested $140 million in Theranos, just for the record.
Okay. Makes me feel a little better.
Well, you get a lot of your facts straight. That's really what matters. And have a track record there. I'm just wondering about the pandemic and how it affected both of these huge behemoths, as you call them, or these Goliaths, because this kind of statistic stays in your head. 1 out of every $2 that was spent online was spent either with Walgreens or with Amazon. I mean, that's just extraordinary. But bricks and mortar, again, was probably hurt a lot more, to put it mildly.
Yeah, so Walmart, it was one of them, besides Amazon's pressure on them over the years, the pandemic forced them, maybe more than anything else, to finally utilize their stores as sort of mini warehouses to help with online orders, both for pickup and delivery. They had no choice but to start shipping stuff out of their stores directly to customer homes, and also to provide more convenient pickup services. The local Walmart near me now has 15 dedicated parking spots just for pickup orders that you place online, and they bring them out to your car. I wouldn't be surprised if I go back in the next year and there's 30 spots, because they are always full. So in that way, force their hand. Taking care of an employee base that big during a pandemic that we have, the likes of which we haven't seen in at least a century, very difficult. And I think in early days, employees would say in some parts of the country, each of them failed in keeping them safe and being as transparent about the illness as employees would have liked. Amazon's hand, it was, record sales, record profits that first year of the pandemic. But they started building out warehouses as if these e-commerce growth numbers were permanent, that this was completely the new normal. And we've seen it sort of go back to more of a steady increase of e-commerce penetration in this country. So it caused Amazon to have millions, tens of millions of extra warehouse space, some extra store space that they've been trying to unload for years. And I think some of that probably had an impact on their bottom line for sure, which may have led to some of the corporate layoffs we've seen at Amazon over the last year. 27,000 corporate employees, the biggest layoffs in their company history.
Could be more layoffs with AI? Is that inevitable? And with all these robots?
Feels inevitable. Both companies will tell you AI and the robots just help their existing employees work better, work more efficiently. They don't mention the increase in quotas for these workers that come with working alongside robots. But, inside Amazon, I've reported this and others have as well. There is a dream that they can have a warehouse one day that's called a lights out facility, which is, robots and only robots with maybe a few specialized technicians to treat the robots when they malfunction or fall over. So I think it's a potential future, but right now they are still massive employers, and that won't change overnight.
Well, you're in Jersey, and not that far from you, I think, was where Amazon wanted to build an AOC's district, and there were some serious conflicts as a result. Amazon moved away. I mean, that whole story
Yeah.
is very revealing, isn't it?
I think
Politically.
so, and
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, so that was in Queens, New York, and um, my opinion at the time and to this day was, I think both sides. So that's the local politicians who were against Amazon coming in, as well as Amazon. I think they both erred there. I think there was some common ground that could have been reached, but Amazon did what sometimes it does when it feels like it's being unfairly targeted, which is, they disengage, and they, as I wrote, and I think some others, they picked up their ball and went home. And I think they actually could have had some really great PR if they, came to that table, at least had some negotiations about, making some tweaks, some big changes to the tax incentives and breaks they were getting. But that's not in their DNA. And so it was maybe wrong of me and other journalists to expect them to do so.
What's the status of their relationship with the unions or unionization in general?
Yeah, so they, like Walmart, are fiercely anti-union. They feel that they don't need that. They have open door policies, and they will. I think their spin is that they will become inflexible or less innovative if they allow. But we did see, and that's in the U.S. We did see one union election victory in Staten Island, New York, at a warehouse there, actually my hometown. But the organizers there of that union, which was a brand new union called the Amazon Labor Union, they've had real trouble trying to get Amazon even to the table. Amazon's been contesting that election. And then there's also been some infighting within that upstart union. So in Europe, Amazon warehouses, there are some unions that have penetrated, but it's still a really long game in the U.S., and the battle seems even harder to win with seeing how they fought back once that election didn't go their way.
I didn't know you were from Staten Island.
Born in Brooklyn, New York, but I was raised in, for better or worse, the fifth and forgotten borough of New York City, Staten Island, New York. Yes.
Yeah, my wife was from Staten Island.
Oh, wow. Well, then, we have a whole nother show to have, but maybe that's another
We could do a
time.
whole show on Staten Island. That would be, I wonder how many downloads we get there nationally and globally. What do you think?
People love to hate. I feel like there's a lot of Staten Island haters in the world, so maybe people would hate listen to us, Michael.
Actually, I'm not. I'm just the opposite. I like Staten Island. Sometime when we're not doing a podcast, we can talk about Staten Island. That'd be fun.
That'd
to
be
do.
nice.
But in the meantime, where do you see all this going? Where's the trajectory at this point in your head?
Yeah, I think Walmart, under their CEO Doug McMillon, has been there about a decade now in the CEO role. He's a lifer. They've really transformed into a company that at least gives online customers, a sufficient second option that can be pretty convenient if convenience is what you're after as an online shopper. Both companies, though, honestly, my chapter on healthcare, I think it's possible we look back 10 years from now, and that's the most important chapter, because they're both think that, at least in the U.S., the healthcare system is broken, costs are too high, and that they should be able to innovate in this space. So we see Walmart actually opening physical clinics called Walmart Health Clinics. They're sort of super centers of medical care. They're attracting some pretty good doctors with high pay from big cities. And there's the biggest struggle there, as a Walmart health executive told me, was they can't keep the best talent on board there, because at the core, they're still a retail company, not a health company. But they're going to try, the Walton family wants them to innovate there. Amazon's doing the same. And so that's the future battle I'm watching very closely. And then what happens with the Federal Trade Commission potential antitrust suit against Amazon? If they're forced to make any big changes, it may not happen for years, but that could turn this battle upside down in a different way as well.
Wish there were Walmarts in rural areas where they need medical care and doctors, perhaps to a much greater degree, immeasurably more than they do in the big cities where Walmarts mainly are. But you're talking about Doug McMillon and CEOs. I mean, there's still all this battle about the salaries and the perks that CEOs get, as opposed to, obviously, not only rank and file employees, but just employees in general. A huge chasm and gap. Now we're hearing Fran Drescher harping on this, the nanny, because of the strike that's going on with AFTRA and the writers in Hollywood and so forth. How does that, from your perspective, as you describe yourself as somewhat of a beat reporter, how does that essentially come down in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, for the critics, they just look at the overall compensation numbers and the multiples of, how many 100 times or whatever the numbers are the CEO makes over average or median or lowest ranked employees, and it's much different than it used to be, and it's kind of hard to understand. You get the big leaders, though. They're saying, well, my base salary, they won't say this publicly, but I know they're thinking it. My base salary is only, $1 million, and the rest is stock. And if, investors see this much value in this and I'm the leader, like, why shouldn't I be rewarded? But, they really try not to harp on it in any discussions. I think Doug McMillon makes all in, including his stock, over $20 million every year. And that's really hard pill to swallow for a lot of employees there who are really struggling to just make it by. And it's the beauty and the curse of capitalism in this country. And I don't see it changing anytime soon, but it sure, to the average person, sure doesn't feel right.
Was McMillon a little bit of a Horatio Alger story? I mean, he was an Arkansas boy who started down, not necessarily at the bottom, but near the bottom, didn't he, with Walton's?
Yeah, he, I think, for how much power he has and how important he is to the world's largest retailer, I still think he's kind of an undercovered and a little bit of an unknown figure. And part of that's by plan, although people at Walmart largely love him. Great leader. Started warehousing job in high school. I forget what the exact wage was, but something really low. Went to grad school and then started off handling the candy department and the tackle department. So he did work his way up. At some point, the Walton family identified him as a future leader, and people who were a little miffed that he seemed to get some special direction inside the company. They called it, he had his own personal improvement plan. So, they made sure he got the international CEO job at one point to get a worldly view. Then he ran the Sam's Club business. So they identified him pretty early. And listen, I talked to over 150 people for this book, some of whom left the company at Walmart not on great terms, but 90% of what I heard was really positive about this leader, his down-to-earth nature, his curiosity. But some will say it's not enough if you look at the wages of the employees or what Walmart's done historically to the small business Main Street communities around the country.
You didn't talk to that many malefactors, huh? I mean...
Yeah, listen, there's just... I tried to spread out my sourcing across just about any type of constituent I could. I did talk to current executives at both companies, tons of former employees and executives, warehouse employees at both companies, labor critics, antitrust critics. In Doug's case specifically, since I wrote a chapter on him, I did also ask the company if they had anyone from his history who they'd like me to talk to. So talked to a guy named Bert Stacy, who ran the Bank of Bentonville and had Doug as an intern back in college. And so I got some great color from Bert. So, I tried to find any type of opinion and perspective I could in reporting this book on these two giants.
When Macmillan and you were in conversation, I mean, you're meeting this guy with great power and great wealth and so forth. That can be very seductive. I mean, to a guy out there with his notebook taking serious notes.
Listen. I think a great journalist will take access when they can get it, as long as that access does not define their book. And so, the amount of people I talked to, amount of sources for the book that were sort of given to me through approval from each company was, I think, less than 10% of the total number of people I spoke to for the book. But I'll be candid. Of course, I want to hear someone's words out of their mouth, and it is better. I mean, you can make a more compelling case in person as a powerful leader than you can through a PR person, I believe, or through email. And so I do feel like I got to know Doug a little bit better with the 90 minutes or so he allocated me inside the same CEO office that Sam Walton once worked out of as well.
He can win you over, though. He can be folksy and, very good with people. I'm thinking about Janet Malcolm's book, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with, where she talks about the need for a journalist to win somebody over and win their trust, because you got to ask hard questions, and that's always a delicate balance.
Yeah, I think, listen, ultimately readers will decide whether I've achieved that balance. I think he has a great reputation, and so I think, inside the company and people who used to work there. So I think in that regard, that will come through in chapter 3 of my book, which I write about him, called, I think it's titled The Hometown Boy. On the other hand, criticisms about his wage and other wages and his decision making, those come through as well. So I aspire to a fair approximation of who he is and the impact he's had, but I'm sure he'll continue to hear back what readers think about that.
The real question is, will he give you another interview now that your book is out?
I mean, I've heard from him a little bit, but can I write his biography? I don't know if I'll have access for that.
Here's Ethan, who says, as we see Taylor Swift donating millions of dollars to local charities in every city she visits in the Eras Tour, should large retailers consider doing more for their communities to show a greater connection?
I mean, I think yes, and I think
both of us would say yes and give our assent to that. But the question is, how do they look at it from that perspective? What could do them and PR?
Yeah, I think I talked back when I was working on a documentary podcast project years before I started working on the book, the Land of Giants series you referenced. I went down to Kansas, where Amazon used to have one of their earliest warehouses, Coffeyville, Kansas. And I was talking to a bunch of people who worked there, some former managers, and they said at the time, it was really up to the local general manager of a warehouse what, if anything, they wanted to do for a community. And so you'd have a really thoughtful GM, take some money out of his budget to throw a little town event, and you'd have others who said, our benefit, how we can benefit this community is through hiring folks. And so I think Amazon has long felt in a lot of different ways that the benefits they can give a community or a certain type of geography is through their core business and nothing else. I think their tune has changed a bit with the blowback from that headquarters search. And so you will see them a little more active in some communities. But neither will bowl you over with trying to win the Local Citizen of the Year award.
I wonder if you could, we just have a few minutes left. I wonder if you could talk about some of the interviews you've done and what you derived and what you really were able to process and advance your own thinking in. I noticed, for example, you talked to the worldwide VP of grocery Amazon. You also talked to the co-founder and CEO of Tropicals and the head of Old Navy. And these were all women, interestingly enough. But these are real movers and shakers. Anything that really comes to mind off the top?
Yeah, so some of those, right? So some of those weren't for this book, but
No, it's for your other project, actually.
Yeah. So over the years, other projects, I've through Recode and the Code Conference, I've interviewed Brian Cornell, who runs Target. A ton of female CEO leaders in the retail world. I guess a couple of things that I've learned, takeaways from my business reporting career.
But before you go there, let me ask you,
Sure.
Do you get the sense that it's still really tough for female CEOs because they're females?
Oh, I mean, I think there's absolutely business world, like the glass ceiling still can exist. I think just look at the numbers in Fortune 500, not only of female CEOs, but also CEOs who are not white, so people of color, and there's still it is still not easy, and can be very difficult, even more difficult depending on what industry you're in. So progress for sure, but sometimes it feels like in some of these industries, it's 2 steps forward or a step forward and 2 back. But I continue to remain hopeful there. And hopefully in the venture capital startup community, we'll see some more progress as well.
Sounds like a good assessment, but now your takeaways.
Yeah, my takeaways, all these interviews I've done over the years. One is, you alluded to this when you're talking about interviewing Doug and trying to remain neutral. Man, storytelling in business, narratives in business, like really have an impact on the future of the company. And I hate admitting that as a journalist who strives to be immune to corporate spin and corporate born narratives, but executives and leaders who are great storytellers, both internally and externally, really are a huge advantage for a company. One in mind from my book is an entrepreneur named Mark Allori, who sold one big company to Amazon, then another giant one to Walmart. And that may be his greatest thing, is he's a corporate vision setter and storyteller, and makes people believe. Even smart people who probably shouldn't believe in an idea, he makes them believe. That's one key takeaway. I don't know if you want any more from me.
That's a key one. That's an important one. And thank you. We've gotten, I think, a lot from you and enjoyed very much talking to you and learn from you, from your writing, as well as the opportunity to talk with you today. So I thank you. And I also extend thanks to all who had the opportunity to listen live to this episode of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, which will be available on Apple and Spotify and at graymatter.show, where you can also sign up for membership. That's Gray with an E. Special thanks to our Gray Matter with Michael Krasny team, Alex, Shannon, Colin, Chad, Kevin, and Jeff. And thanks to this episode's special guest, Jason Del Rey.
Thanks so much, Michael.
I'm Michael Krasny.
Bandwidth for Gray Matter is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.